Newly elected KwaZulu-Natal ANC leadership is today visiting former President Jacob Zuma at his Nkandla homestead. They're seeking guidance from former leaders of the party. Zuma, who's on medical parole, is embroiled on fraud and corruption charges linked to the arms deal. Our senior reporter Siphamandla Goge is in Nkandla and joins us this afternoon. Good afternoon, Siphamandla. This is a second of its kind. The KwaZulu-Natal leadership first visited the former President Thabo Mbeki. Today they are visiting the former President Jacob Zuma. What exactly do they say they seek to achieve in these engagements with former leaders of the party?
They say they want to draw from the political wisdom of the former leaders of the ANC. As the newly elected leadership in KwaZulu-Natal, they are of the view that in order for them to navigate around difficult political challenges in the province, they need the guidance and wisdom of former leaders. They have already met with former President Thabo Mbeki in Gauteng, Johannesburg. They are in KwaZulu-Natal today meeting with former President Jacob Zuma. They say he still has a role to play in advising them how to navigate around this difficult political terrain in the province of KwaZulu-Natal, having led this province, by the way, in terms of ANC provincial leadership in the past, and now they say he can advise and guide them on how to navigate around the difficult political terrain leading up to 2024. Of course, they are hoping that he will be able to advise them accordingly as to how they should gear up for the upcoming general elections. It's not only that they are visiting former President Jacob Zuma, they have visited former President Thabo Mbeki, but this is a conference resolution which says they need to visit former leaders of the ANC in particular. But not only that, and other key strategic stakeholders in KwaZulu-Natal. Last week, if I'm not mistaken, they visited the Nazareth Baptist Church, the dominant faction there, which has got millions of followers, and that is Ebuhleni, led by Unyazi Zulu, Inkosi Mduduzi Shembe. They met with him, and 2 or 3 weeks ago, they met with Amazulu King, Misuzulu Kazwelithini. So they say they want to reconnect with their former leaders, but most importantly, other stakeholders in the province, including the religious sector and the institution of traditional leadership in the province of KwaZulu-Natal. They say those institutions or stakeholders will be able to help them regain lost ground. Now, it's very difficult in KwaZulu-Natal for any ANC leadership to lead and lead well if it is perceived to be against former President Jacob Zuma. You can contextualize that anyhow, but bring into the picture how Sihle Zikalala, as the former provincial chairperson, and Mtumseni Ntuli as the former provincial secretary, were putted out and not re-elected in the recently held provincial conference of the ANC in KwaZulu-Natal, simply because the majority of ANC branches accused them and felt that they had betrayed former President Jacob Zuma. So the new leadership has to tread carefully in how it deals with the issue of the former president, who remains a dominant political player within the ANC politics in the province and within the broader political landscape in KwaZulu-Natal. So if you want to lead and lead well in this province, somehow you must send a message that you support former President Jacob Zuma, whether your critics will agree with that or not, because they will question you to say, hang on here, what kind of message are you sending in terms of associating with someone who's facing serious corruption charges and someone who's accused of too many things that have hurt the image of the ANC. However, the ANC in KwaZulu-Natal will be quick to say, well, they are of the view that he has led the ANC very well and they've got some lesson to draw from that. So they have to navigate around that sharp criticism which is raised by some National Executive Committee members of the ANC, who are saying, what kind of a message are you sending by going to someone who's facing legal challenges and you are seeking political wisdom? What kind of wisdom are you asking that person to provide, whereas he couldn't do that while he was still in charge? That's the question we posed to the provincial secretary of the ANC in KwaZulu-Natal, Bheki Mtolo, who said, according to them, based on their analysis, they are of the view that former President Jacob Zuma has contributed positively within the broader political space of the ANC. And when he was the president of the Republic of South Africa, they say his administration has led the country very well. Of course, their critics will disagree in that regard and bring into the fore the issue of allegations of state capture and how certain African institutions and state-owned entities were crippled under former President Jacob Zuma's administration. ANC in KwaZulu-Natal says, well, he did very well in terms of infrastructure development and within the ANC politics, and they are of the view that he can advise them better moving forward. And the conference resolution of the ANC in KwaZulu-Natal is that they must, number one, acknowledge his legacy, but preserve it and continue to support him even when he goes to court to appear, as we know that he still faces those fraud and corruption charges related to the arms deal. And the provincial secretary of the ANC in KwaZulu-Natal, Mtolo, telling me that they will continue to support him up until all the legal troubles are over, and most importantly, they will continue to honor and preserve his legacy. Let's take a listen.
No, it's not about his legacy not being preserved. You remember in 2012, the ANC adopted a program where we're going around all over the country and preserving the legacy of all ANC former presidents. It's a continuation of that program. And then you'd know that when he came into government in 2009, one of the massive things he did, President Zuma's administration, he spent about 1 trillion in infrastructure development, focusing on rural development. He rolled out a massive ARV program. He built 2 universities within a short space of time. He increased the NSFAS funding around, I think, from around 3 billion to 15 billion, the access to higher education. Then it's a legacy that it can. But beyond that, you remember he served 10 years in Robben Island, fighting for the people of South Africa, bringing about justice to our country. And he left the country. He really did everything for us to be free today.
All right, Siphamandla, we'll leave it there for now. That's senior reporter Siphamandla Goge giving us the latest coming from KZN.